Dr. Julia, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast. I am so excited to have you here. We've known each other for at least a few years now, and it's always been in the back of my mind. I've never had a psychologist on the show before, so I cannot wait to sit down to learn about your brilliance and hear the full backstory. So thank you so much for being here.
Wow, you never had a psychologist. That's so cool. Oh my God.
In 250 episodes, you're first. So we're going
Amazing.
to rock the show today. I'm
Well,
wondering, in a few short sentences, can you explain why you decided to become a registered clinical and counseling psychologist?
yeah, it's funny. I actually did an undergrad in an entirely different field.
What?
It was labor management relations.
Oh my gosh.
I, yeah, totally different, right? I, um, I graduated, tried to work in the field, really said, oh, wow, this is not for me. And I was like stumped. So I went home to my dad and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like I just graduated and kind of wasted 4 years and like what now? So I was actually, you're gonna laugh at this, but I was experimenting with different exams. So the GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT. I didn't bother with the MCAT, that's a bit too intense, but and I was like, let's see if I'm gonna throw the dice and see if one of those kind of gets me like a super high score, then I'll go into something related to that. Anyway, I'm studying for the GMAT. I decided to take a course in it, and I was sitting with a person who was studying with me. We went downstairs for lunch, and she starts pouring her heart out to me, and then says, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You need to be a psychologist, not go into like an MBA." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "You just profoundly changed my world." Right. And I'm like, "What?" Okay. I just wasn't comprehending. And she was like, "It really made a difference." And I said, "But you're a friend of mine." And she's like, "I am not your friend. You just met me today." Right. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah."
Oh my gosh.
So,
What did you do to change her life in a conversation?
I mean, to be honest, like it was so long ago now, I can't remember what was the content, but it was an interpersonal one about a
Yeah.
relationship. I know that. And I guess the angle I took to it just kind of like blew her mind. And then she realized what she was doing and the pattern she was having. And so that just changed things for her. And
Mm-hmm.
we continue to be friends, of course, but like for me, that was like the pivotal moment of, but I just kind of like do that with friends. We talk and they share and I share, and like that's, isn't that normal? So,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, no, it's not. Like you did something different. I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. So went home to my dad. Do you know anybody in the field? Because my dad's a prof at U of T in pharmacology at the time. I'm like, anybody in like psychology? Because I kind of want to work in the field a little bit before another undergrad.
Yeah.
So he did. He connected me with what was the Addiction Research Foundation at the time, which is now CAMH. And I got a summer job, loved it, just loved it. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to do psychology. And then it was just a matter of like getting the courses I needed, then a master's, and then the PhD. Like it was like a done deal. I was going to be a full licensed psychologist. So yeah.
Very cool. I think you share some really important messages within that story too. Number one, oftentimes it is people outside of ourselves that can show us what our unique brilliance is. Like we walk around all day and we're like, oh, I'm not that great. I'm not good at anything. But sometimes it's when somebody stops us and says, oh my God, you are such a good listener, or you helped me get through that breakup. And it was because of the way you communicated this concept. And sometimes we just don't see the obvious. So for anyone listening who's like, I just don't know what I'm good at, ask some friends or just notice patterns in conversations or what types of issues people come to you for. And you might identify something that you are uniquely good at that maybe not everybody possesses.
Totally. I love that. I love that. Yeah. 100%.
And another part that you mentioned too is like you did a full undergrad and then decided to switch. I think a lot of people, they just think, well, this is my destiny. I'm just trapped in this career that I really don't want to be in. However, it's so important to realize that like what is life if you feel locked in a job in your 20s, right? If you're like, well, I spent 4 years, I spent all this money, so I'm just going to succumb to this for the next 40 or 50 years of my life. It's like, no, get back out there and find that thing that really lights you up, and don't be afraid to chase it, because it's not too late.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That is a huge message that's so important. Yeah.
So, can you share a bit more about how your practice has evolved over the past 20 years? I know you're quite entrepreneurial today and you have online programs, group programs, but I'm assuming you started with more of like a traditional one-on-one model. So, I would just love to hear a bit about the evolution.
Yeah, totally. So when I began practicing, starts with internships and things like that, absolutely the only model there was one-on-one, really, at that level, right? So you kind of just you continue doing what you were introduced to, right? And so when I got my license, I was asked by a friend of mine to fill a void in the fertility world. So counseling for fertility, because it's such a traumatic area of loss and everything. So the one-on-one started there, and it was kind of one-on-two, because I would also work with couples, right, for that. And it was great. And it, it was an area, it was a niche. So that worked. And it filled quickly, right? I was one of the only psychologists in the field. There's other therapists, but not psychologists. And because of my coverage, that was really helpful for people who are already spending thousands and thousands of dollars on their fertility treatment, to have support that's covered. So it quickly filled, and that was great. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. Like, I'm helping, an area of need, and my practice is full. Except that, there's kind of a cap in terms of how many people I can serve. And I did that for like 11 years straight. And then I started realizing that that's not going to really work. It's not sustainable for me. And also just the impact I wanted to have. So I remember speaking with Nawaz, who used to be Nawaz Habib, who I think you know, and he used to be my chiropractor. And he moved, and then I was scanning something, and then I saw him on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, Nawaz. So I connected with him, and he told me about a community of mastermind community, and I joined that, and it was life-changing. So the guidance I received, like, could I say the name of the
Of course.
Okay, yeah. So it was Archangel, and the guidance I received from Giovanni was exceptional. So I presented him with this concept of my one-on-one model, that I have some ideas in terms of fertility, which had also, by the way, morphed to parenting. And I'm like, I have a book, but I don't know how to like pivot here, right? And expand. I want to impact more people. And so he introduced me to the concept of a group. I thought of group before, and this was interesting because I was getting stuck in the logistics. How am I going to open the door on a Saturday? It was getting like things like that were like coming up. And anyway, the thing was, I joined Archangel during the pandemic. And so Zoom, like this, became the way. So he's like, you don't have to worry about opening doors. They just show up. So suddenly the group model became like really practical. And so I pursued that. And so that allowed me to then expand. Right.
And if you were talking to another psychologist or practicing health professional who currently feels stuck in that one-to-one and just does not see how to get out of it, what advice might you offer now based on your own experience?
Yeah, totally. Creating these small groups, those very intimate groups, right? I'm not into like the big mass groups. There's 6 people. And so what you're doing is converting your individual clients into those groups. So they're just shifting and seeing it from a new angle. The benefit is, there's several benefits, but one of them is that they're getting to learn from me still and process with me still, so it's safe, and connect with other people who they know have also worked with me, which makes it another layer of safety. right? So they know they're walking in with like-minded people. And when you do that, advancement is like that, right? Because now they're not just getting me, but they're getting them and each other. And that's a beautiful thing. And you don't have to market it because they're already your clients,
This
right?
is so brilliant too, because I talk to a lot of practitioners who think, oh my gosh, I'm going to launch this group program and I don't know where to find people. I'm like, well, have you worked with any one-on-one clients? Because those should be the people who are the first in. And I love that you share that there is that added layer of safety because they're all your clients or existing clients. So that means you vetted them and you know that the group is going to work synergistically, because I think the fear is oftentimes, will clients who are struggling with their health or well-being or relationship, will they want to be in a group environment? And sure, there are probably some services that just don't work as well, but you are an example of, if you curate the group and you keep it cozy, it is so possible and maybe even a better experience to put these clients in a group where they feel less alone.
Totally, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So you call yourself the Possibility Psychologist, which I absolutely love. Can you tell us the origin story of how this title came to be?
Yes, for sure. So my dear friend, who I think you also know, Vera,
Yeah.
Vera Milan Gervais, she is the words lady, and she just sat down with me one day and we were talking, and well, it was actually in an archangel call, and she just said, psychologist is great, and clinical and counseling psychologist explains who you are, or registered psychologist, but she's like, but what about it, right? Like, what do you bring to the table that's unique to you? And from there, I sort of play with some words, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of all about things being possible. Like, I am a dreamer at heart. A lot of people, when I was a kid, used to say, don't be ridiculous, that kind of thing, because I was always thinking up quote unquote crazy ideas, like out there. And but it really, actually, like, the honest truth is, possibility for me came from loving Fonzie on Happy Days. So it was his snap of your fingers and things happen. In my mind as a child became, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Like, and I was grounded in reality. Like, I know that that's not actually, like, you can't turn on a jukebox with your hand, but there was just this like energy about him that was like, no, why not? Right.
Yeah.
And that became imprinted in me. So when Vera was asking me, I'm like, yeah, I think anything's possible. And she's opened up with possibility psychologist. I'm like, oh yeah, that feels so good.
I love it. And because we have mostly business owners listening to this show, I'm curious, why is the word possibility so important for entrepreneurs?
Yes, because we will hit so many different stuck points, right? Because we're doing things differently. To me, entrepreneur means we're doing things in creative ways that are different from the traditional road, right? And in doing so, that means we don't have a traditional path that's already laid for us. Let's compare it to like an engineer who, you go to school, you become an engineer, you go into an engineering job, you're good to go, right? So even a doctor, right? Like, there's a path that's already been laid, but for an entrepreneur, it's like, what does that mean? And where is that? So it's full of possibility, but without the attitude of anything's possible, we can get stuck and sabotage ourselves.
Oh my God, that's so good. I need to like re-listen to that. And you're right. If we don't believe that anything is possible, we are blocking ourselves as business owners and as visionary entrepreneurs. And that's kind of the death of someone like us, is to feel stuck, right? That's why we left a traditional structure in a job or in a career path, was to explore possibility. So it's so important, I think, to reconnect with that word and like what it means to us, and to remind ourselves, like you say, anything is possible. So it's like, we need to make sure that we're not dampening that belief or downloading other people's programs that are telling us, just stay where you are. Like, you've done enough, you've accomplished enough, or just be satisfied with what's in front of you. But it's like, but if I see possibility, like, aren't I allowed to chase it and continue dreaming of what this word could mean for me in my business?
Totally. Totally. I'm just going to add a little bit to that, because
Please do.
having the mindset, Kelsey, is really critical, obviously, but we sabotage ourselves to keep us safe, right? Like, the part that's sabotaging is saying, I don't like you going off the traditional path. This is feeling really uncomfortable, so I'm just going to like shut you down. Right. And then we kind of fall into that, and that's where we get stuck. It's like, oh, I tried it, but I don't know, it was really not feeling right, so I just said skip it. Sometimes things don't feel right, like when I went to the labor management job, right, and it was clear. But other times you want to make sure you're actually soothing your fear. You're really acknowledging that saboteur, so that you can say, hey, I get you, thank you for showing up and trying to keep me alive and safe. And through a practice I created called the habit of heart, you can learn how to empathize and soothe that part of you, so that you can then enter from a place of calm and really thinking through, is this right for me or not? Because if I'm going from fear, I usually sabotage it. If I'm going from like, just push through and just do it, maybe it's not right for me, and that's also very, very harmful to us, to keep pushing through. So the process of sort of soothing the system and learning how to validate that part of us without succumbing to it, that's the practice that I created, so people can bridge that. I want it. Yeah, you're right. Possibility makes sense.
Yeah.
Shoot, I sabotaged it again. Right. Oh, why can't I get it? I don't want people to get more critical because they can't stay in possibility. To stay in possibility, the habit is really helpful.
Ooh, I have so many questions on that. So, number one, what are some of the ways that we can stay in possibility?
Yeah. So slowly building a resilience within ourselves, right? And that, because I created this process, I'm just going to share my process.
Yeah, I want to hear your stuff. Like, this is wonderful.
Okay, cool. So the habit of heart is a process I developed based on all the clinical years of experience and my own self, right? Keeping myself in the possibility. So what I notice is, I'll just use an example of me, right? So public speaking is an area that's always been a very terrifying space, and like getting up on a stage and really presenting. And so now I want to do that. That's my next sort of thing, right?
I love
it. So I'm training, and I'm training with Blake, actually. And we are working towards developing the skill, right? But what I'm finding is there are moments when, let's say I'm speaking and someone says, sorry, can you say that again? And then I go right back into my old, see, you can't speak, you mumble. Because that was the label that I received when I was a kid. Yeah. As I see, you shouldn't be doing this, stop. So there was a pang inside of me, right? That pang now, instead of run away and forget it, you're right, I shouldn't do this. That pang now is a cue to me to start the habit of heart. And that means I put my hand on my heart, I drop my shoulders, I take a deep breath in, and I breathe in that part of me that's scared. That's like, no, you mumble. We don't want to put ourselves out there and be criticized. Like, please stop, right? I bring her in and I talk to her and I let her know I get how scared this is, how scary this is, right? And yeah, I did mumble a bit there. And in spite of that, we're still okay. I've got you, right? We're an adult now. We can handle this. Now, that's a very basic way of explaining it, but it's all based in attachment and belonging, right? Because we sabotage ourselves when we don't feel like we're going to belong. So you're going to put yourself on stage, people are going to make fun of you. Now you're not going to have belonging, right? That's the threat. And our attachment to like a secure attachment, which is where I know I can soothe myself, I can see myself and feel safe. And that's from Dan Siegel. Yeah.
So good. Is the habit of heart something that people can self-teach? Like, is this a course that you've created, or do they have to work with you through a live coaching program?
So there's both. So I have it on YouTube already. It's a high level version, meaning it's not situation specific, but it's a building trust with the parts of us that are feeling those pangs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feeling those insecurities. And when we do that, we're trying to build trust within ourselves, right? So that part of us, like, no, I show up for you each time, right? And slowly we build that relationship with us, rather than it being, hey, Kelsey, I depend on you to make me feel better.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's so that's available on YouTube, and people practicing it are finding it very helpful, but it's high level.
Yep.
If you want to go deeper in, then I have courses that it's called Awakening the Wisdom Within, and it's about connecting with our inner child. And I'll take you through like levels of shame and guilt and grief and anger, and situationally teach you like words to help you empathize with that part and guide you forward so they feel safe. So because that's a little more in depth, right? It is through the coursework, but one could still figure it out for themselves. It depends how savvy you are in terms of, awareness of self.
Mm-hmm. I want to keep going on this topic of those moments as business owners or just as humans on this earth when we feel stuck, or when we're kind of encountering just like this block. I know something else that you talk about is inner child work. So I'm curious, can you first explain what is inner child work to somebody who's never heard of it? They've never even considered how that could be sabotaging maybe something that's a goal or a dream of theirs.
100%. Yeah. So there are, when we are, let's say in a relationship, let's say you and I are talking, right? And let's say you say something to me and I get a little bit like, oh, that felt like a little bit critical, or a little bit, that's not adult me, right? That fear that kicks in, that yuck factor, is the little kid, right? So maybe it's 8-year-old me, maybe it's 6-year-old me, it doesn't really matter, but it's young me. And that young me is saying, if someone doesn't like me, I might be kicked out, right? And if I'm kicked out, I'm going to die, is literally what that part is saying. Because as a child, we need to be part of a tribe, a family, in order to survive. That's just the truth. A 6-year-old, you can't send them out in the world and then they're not going to do so well, right? They need the approval and the safety of a family. So when there's a threat, that part of us gets activated. So today's threat activates a young part of us. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense.
Okay.
So why might it be important for somebody who's building a business, especially in the online space, when they're getting really visible, maybe more visible than they've ever been before? Why might it be of interest for them to heal or work on their inner child?
Totally. So for some, it may be that they're very securely attached and they feel solid in it. They feel resilient, courageous, confident already. So for them, you don't have to. You're good. Keep expanding, keep having fun, keep diving into new things. For if you find yourself though knowing you want to, and I'm just delaying it, or coming up with reasons why today is just not possible because I got a million bills to pay, and I've got, like, we come up with lots of great reasons to not do things. That becomes a pattern, right? And we start to become aware of that. So that's one reason why we want to go, okay, what am I doing? Right? And why is this happening? Because I know my goal, and yet it's getting further and further away instead of sticking to my timelines, right? And we can justify it, Kelsey, like, especially when it's I call it productive busying, right? And it's just like, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got that, and it's really valid, right? And I justify why I need to get that done first. But that could be your inner child saying, I don't really want to go there. This is scary, right? So we want to really acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So important. I know something else you talk about as a tool, whether it be for entrepreneurs or individuals, is learning to deal with a feeling of heaviness. And I feel like business owners especially are no stranger to that feeling, because business ebbs and flows. We have seasons that are full of wins and successes, but then we also go through seasons, whether it be a month or a week or even just a few days, where we just have this unexplained heaviness. It's like we wake up and it's just like things aren't working, or there's friction in the business, or there's a failed launch, or I got a rejection from a client. So I'm curious, do you have any tips for someone who is currently experiencing that feeling of heaviness and maybe they don't know what to do with it or how to move through it?
Totally. Uh, so there's different sort of elements of heaviness. So I just like one heaviness is sort of a exhaustion, and I haven't really taken time for me, right? Where I've just been pushing through, and I have to prove myself, right? And it's kind of a struggle through it all. That heaviness is just complete exhaustion. And to me, that's a cue to me, I need rest, right? It's time to pause. Nothing bad is going to happen if I pause, right? And that's critical. The heaviness that could come from, and I'd probably call that more like an anxiety from rejection or something like that, is different. And that's where I would put in like the habit of heart to soothe that part, to say, I get why that would feel horrible if somebody just rejected you. You really were excited about it. And we're still safe. We're still okay, right? That was hard and we're still okay, right? It's an empathy and fact kind of dialogue with breath work, right? With putting your hand on the heart. We want to bring all mind, body, soul, the whole thing into the practice. And that will help you then soothe it, to then decide again, do I want to pursue this, or do I, it's not really the right thing for me, right? It gives you some clarity on where to go next once I've soothed my system. Our nervous system needs to be calm, or real decisions can't be made. Is that answering the question or no?
It absolutely does. So for somebody who has never done self-talk, say, like they're a hustler, they're a go, they never give themselves a few minutes to self-soothe, to have inner or just dialogue with themselves, whether that's like, actually speaking or just kind of conversing with yourself, and like thinking of what's going on and asking yourself these questions that may elicit a response. Any tips for somebody who's like, this sounds crazy, I've never done self-talk or self-soothing? Where do they begin? Because we've never touched on this on the podcast before.
Yeah. So they have to be willing. So to be curious, at least, about what we just talked about.
Yeah. Yes.
If they're going to be like, yeah, that just sounds like way too much, and no, there's no way, and I have way too much to do, and that's just not possible, right? There's no room for, no time for that. It becomes dismissed. I'm not going to try and convince you. Like there's nothing to tell that person, because they're locked in it because they have reasons.
Yeah.
Right. There's no judgment. They have their reasons. There is a very strong part of them that feels it needs to be protected, and that's okay. Right. But if you're like, well, okay, yeah, you're right. I do feel like I'm kind of like burning out all the time, or I'm feeling that heaviness constantly, right? That exhaustion. And maybe I could slow down and like listen to it. Then it is about mindfulness to start, right? But I would start with like breath, like just a slow, deep breath. Right. And noticing what that feels like, to just put your hand on your heart, drop your shoulders, and do a 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. And has your mind raced away? Is it like completely still going? So then do it a few more times, right? Just bring it back to notice the sensation of your hand on your heart. Like just bring it back to the moment and let the chatter go on, right? But it's slowly training the brain that, yeah, but I'm here right now. I know there's like X, Y, and Z to do, and all these things that have to happen, and I'm here right now. So mindfulness training through breath is the best place to start.
So many good tips. Is there any other tool that we haven't mentioned yet that you find that you're talking to to all your clients? You're constantly recommending something or a practice or a ritual, something that we haven't yet discussed that you want to share.
Yeah, comedy.
Oh, oh my God, I totally didn't expect you to say that.
It's a very zen. Yeah, no, comedy to me is the way to kind of just jolt us out of
Oh my
whatever we're
God.
spinning in or stuck in. It just lightens everything up, right? It's a really underutilized tool. And honestly, like with my fertility clients, for example, like we're constantly, I'm like, throw on YouTube, like find funny puppy videos, like something like something silly and funny, and just watch a 1 minute clip. I don't need you to watch a whole sitcom or it's not, it's just, we're just moving you out of that that state.
Yes.
Right. And so comedy is amazing. Even just smiling, it's amazing. Yeah.
Can change your whole state. And you're right. I love putting on, like, I'll do a comedy special on Netflix, and yeah, it's a little longer, but I might only watch 10 minutes and I notice how my state changes. And it's just like my energy is shifted immediately. And if you can go to live comedy or laugh with friends at a restaurant, like that is next level as well. The ability to just completely shake things up inside of you.
Exactly.
So as business owners, we're always needing to level up our own skills, solve problems for ourselves and our businesses. So I am curious, is there a block that you're currently navigating yourself or a skill set that you're currently trying to upgrade that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I alluded to it before. So public speaking, but on like a stage with many people. The Zoom one's not so hard for me, but standing on a stage actually in front of people is another ball game for me. So yes, so I am working on that. And as I work on it and I feel that pang, I use the habit of heart to soothe and comfort. That part, reminding me that I'm still safe. Like, it sounds silly because you'll hear in the habit of heart on the YouTube video, it's like, I've got you, you're safe with me. But it's literally the little kid is in their attachment panic. They're not sure if they're safe. Right. It's the adults, like, of course you're like, what's the problem? But this is not the thing. We have to bring that nurturing side to go, yeah, that got activated. That's the cue. Let me soothe and comfort. It only takes a minute, right? Once they trust us, especially that part of us. And it's bring us back to safety. Right. Even if I get on stage, Kelsey, and I flop, right? Like completely, people are like laughing at me, not in a good way. People are like, what are you talking about? It's ridiculous. Like anything. Yeah, it'll feel overwhelming and terrible in the moment. Yeah. But I'm safe. I'm not dying. And I say that seriously. Yeah. Our amygdala is saying you're gonna die, you're dying. Right. And we're saying, no, actually, we're not. It sucks. Yes. And we're still safe. Yeah. So I wanted to emphasize that part. It seems like we know we're safe, but we don't. When that part's activated, it thinks we're a little kid and we're going to be kicked out of our tribe, and then we're going to be eaten by a tiger. Okay, like that's what happens in those moments. Yeah. Such
an important conversation. Julia, if people want to learn more about your work, they want to work with you. I mean, obviously we'll link the Habit of Heart on YouTube, but where are the best places for them to connect with you and to stay in touch?
Yeah. I mean, I have my YouTube channel, so that's just Dr. Julia Sen. I've got my Instagram at Dr. Julia Sen, and I'm on TikTok, but it's the same. And then on my website, so just drjuliasen.com. My phone number's there. There's a contact sheet. I am not taking any more one-on-one though. So, there's some exceptions I'll make here and there if it's very specific, but generally speaking, there's not even a real waiting list anymore. I think it's really more about group, and I offer very different types of groups. So I offer a newborn parent group, which means if you have a child under 2, not just an infant, but under 2, then there's a small group of 6 parents, who will come in for training on how to be a self-caring and self-aware parents, so that we are actually creating a really positive impact on our children. and then that's creating their resilience and courage and confidence. So I'm actually doing a webinar on Tuesday about that. But and then there is a group for the inner child called Awakening the Wisdom Within. That's under the belonging section of my website. So that's another program that runs. And then I have a renewed parent program for ages like above 2, basically, but not into the teen years. Teen years, I only do talks at schools. So yeah, so parenting, fertility work is a specific thing I do also. Now that I'm realizing I'm starting a new niche, which is parenting after infertility.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole other kind of pressure that parents are feeling because of their miracle baby.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic and unhelpful, but very, very normal and common, but it's not good for them, right? Because too much. So there's a parenting after infertility niche that I'm starting with a group also.
Such important work that you're doing. And I would encourage anyone who resonates with any of those niches and groups to definitely check out your website and to inquire there. So Julia, thank you so much for sharing your business background, your wisdom around self-care tools, inner child, all the good stuff, the habit of heart. So we thank you for being here and wish you all of the best on your journey.
Thank you, Kelsey. This was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.